Whatever happened to the Venture refit of the Galaxy class? This was mentioned by a commenter a while back, and it piqued my interest enough to want to explore the idea. We only ever see the Venture refit a few times on screen, and then never again, despite the Galaxy class making many more appearances afterwards. So, what happened? First, let's answer the obvious question: what is the Venture refit? When the USS Venture made its first appearance on screen in the Star Trek Deep Space Nine episode The Way of the Warrior, it was a Galaxy class, a lot like the Enterprise D from Star Trek The Next Generation. However, Venture featured a small but noticeable structural difference from the Enterprise and other Galaxy class starships. It had two small raised phaser arrays on the top or dorsal side of the warp nacelles. While not an official canon name, most fans refer to this variant of the Galaxy class as the Venture refit because its first and only appearances were on the USS Venture, thus naming this refit after the only ship it ever appeared on. However, Star Trek Online refers to this version of the Galaxy class simply as the Galaxy refit. Before I get into the fan theorizing, I want to get the boring real-world explanation out of the way. USS Venture was a reuse of the 4-foot-long filming model of the Enterprise D, which had previously been modified for the Next Generation finale All Good Things into the alternate future version of the Enterprise, or commonly referred to as the Galaxy Dreadnought or Galaxy X. Actually, can I take a moment to talk about how stupid the name Galaxy X is? It sounds like something out of a bad cartoon from the 80s or 90s that you insisted was really good when you were a kid, but rewatching it as an adult, you realize, oh, this doesn't hold up at all. That's the vibe the Galaxy X name gives. I never understood why the fandom latched onto that name for the All Good Things Enterprise. Even Memory Beta lists this version of the Galaxy class as the Galaxy X, so it must be in some licensed Star Trek media, I just don't know what it is. Anyway, while attempting to remove those additional parts from the filming model to use for USS Venture, it was found that those phaser-mounted nacelle strips couldn't be removed without causing damage. You can see that those phaser mounts are actually placed backwards compared to their original position on the future Enterprise, which to me suggests that they actually did get them off, but in fact did cause damage to the original model and had to be placed back into that new position in order to cover up the damage. Later appearances of the Galaxy class would be made either using the AMT model kits or the computer-generated model, both of which were modeled after the Enterprise D, so neither featured the additional phaser strips. Fun fact, the reason USS Lakota was an Excelsior refit in the Deep Space Nine episode Paradise Lost is actually pretty similar to this. It was originally supposed to be a stock version of the Excelsior class, but the original Excelsior filming model had been modified to be used as the Enterprise B for Star Trek Generations. When it came time to use the model as USS Lakota, they found that they couldn't remove the refit pieces without causing damage to the filming model, so Lakota wound up being the only other Excelsior class besides Enterprise B to sport the refit on screen. And like with the Galaxy class, subsequent appearances of the Excelsior class were either the AMT model kits or the computer-generated model, both of which were based off of the classic Excelsior. Now, here's everything we know about the USS Venture in canon, and heads up, it's not a lot. As I said earlier, it first appeared in the Deep Space Nine Season 4 premiere The Way of the Warrior, where it was the lead ship in a task force under the command of Admiral Haster, meant to reinforce Deep Space Nine from the attacking Klingon fleet led by Chancellor Gowron and General Martok, which retreated before Venture's task force could join the battle.
And this, we do not forgive or forget.
Venture is seen docked with Deep Space Nine near the end of the episode, where it can be seen on screen for all of 7 seconds. Venture also briefly appears at the end of Dr. Bashir, I presume, in the show's 5th season. It's not mentioned by name, but does reuse the same footage from Way of the Warrior. Later that season, in Sacrifice of Angels, Venture is mentioned in dialogue during Operation Return, which was the battle to retake Deep Space Nine from the Dominion.
The Magellan and the Venture are supposed to be protecting our starboard flanks. They're in too tight.
And is later seen docked with the station near the end of the episode, again recycling the original footage from Way of the Warrior. There is, however, one final appearance of USS Venture in Star Trek, and this one isn't recycled footage. In Deep Space Nine's Season 6 finale Tears of the Prophets, Venture can be seen during the Battle of Chintaka. This shot of a Galaxy class destroying a Cardassian defense satellite with photon torpedoes is confirmed to be USS Venture by John Gross and Karen Siklis of Digital Muse. That's the production house that did most of the CGI work for Deep Space Nine and Voyager. Now, despite this being confirmed to be USS Venture, you can clearly see that this ship doesn't feature the additional phaser arrays mounted on the warp nacelles, implying, from an in-universe perspective, Venture's refit was removed at some point between Operation Return and the first Battle of Chintaka. Now, an interesting note about the digital model of USS Venture, While it's not legible on screen, though maybe it would be if Paramount would finally give Deep Space Nine the HD remaster it deserves, the model does have Venture's name and registry printed on it. So technically, this is the first time we get to see the ship's registry number, NCC 71854, having been confirmed by the folks at Digital Muse as well as other internal documents for Deep Space Nine's production. But even more interesting, John Gross and Karen Siklis also confirmed that this version of Venture also features the ship's name on the underside of the saucer. Many fans think this was a feature unique to the USS Challenger, a Galaxy-class scene in the Star Trek Voyager episode Timeless. Obviously because it's the only time we ever get a good look at it on screen, but apparently Venture had it first, and it was merely carried over to Challenger because they reused the same model. Though while Venture and Challenger had this feature, I have no idea why other uses of the Galaxy-class digital model didn't also have this feature, like USS Galaxy, which also appeared in the first Battle of Chintaka. Now, getting back on track, this leads us to two questions. Why was Venture refitted in the first place, and why was that refit later removed? Of course, we already know the real-world reason for this. Venture's last appearance was made using the CG model of the Galaxy class, which was based off of the Enterprise D, and thus never sported Venture's extra phaser arrays. But that answer's boring, so let's speculate some lore. Adding extra armaments to the Galaxy class makes sense, given what we already know is going on with the Federation around the time we first see Venture. It's only been a little bit over a year since the USS Odyssey was destroyed by the Jem'Hadar, and we know Starfleet spent much of that year refitting and reinforcing Deep Space Nine itself. But DS9 is just one space station, so of course they'd want to make sure that the rest of the fleet could stand up to the Jem'Hadar as well.
I've found it wise to never underestimate the Federation's technical skill.
Many ships throughout the fleet likely received some sort of refit or modification, but refitting the Galaxy class specifically makes a lot of sense given the amount of struggles that the class faced up to this point. While originally seen as one of the greatest technological marvels ever created by the Federation up to that point, there were likely concerns about their longevity after the losses of the Yamato, Odyssey, and Enterprise. Galaxy-class ships were expected to last up to a century, but they had already lost 3 of the original 6 of the class within the first decade of their service. So, all that plus the looming threat of the Dominion, it makes sense that Starfleet would be looking for ways to make sure the Galaxy-class would live up to its original expectations. Now, with all that said, none of this explains why only Venture was seen with its specific refit, or why it was removed. At this point, there's really nothing left to do but speculate, because there is no explanation for Venture's refit, the addition or the removal of it. Neither in official canon from the TV shows or in licensed beta canon. Which Venture does make a number of appearances throughout several books, a few of the video games, and even one of the modules for the Star Trek Adventures tabletop RPG. From what I can tell, the only licensed material outside of the TV shows that even acknowledges that the Venture refit even exists at all is Star Trek Online. Personally, I like to think that Venture's refit was one of several refit options that Starfleet was trying across the Galaxy line, possibly the only one that made any sort of noticeable external change to the hull. After multiple trial runs and actual use cases in battle against the Dominion, it's possible that one of these options won out over the one being tested on Venture. That one being applied to the rest of the Galaxy-class line, including Venture, thus explaining why its refit was possibly removed, making way for the other one that Starfleet possibly preferred. Maybe the extra phasers caused the weapons array to draw too much power from the ship. Or maybe they interfered with the warp drive somehow, since they were mounted directly on top of the warp nacelles. Or maybe they just proved to be redundant because the Galaxy-class already had phasers that covered those positions. Now, because there's already a real-world connection between the All Good Things Enterprise and the Venture, it's easy to assume that they're connected in-universe as well. I think it's possible that Venture's refit could have been an early step in what would have eventually led to what we saw on the alternate future Enterprise D. I think a lot of fans assume that the All Good Things Enterprise was like the next stage of the Galaxy class, something that was planned and refitted all together in one go, kind of like the Constitution class refit from the early 2270s. But I prefer to think that those upgrades were added to the Enterprise over time, piece by piece. Maybe it wasn't even something that was standard to the Galaxy class at that point, but rather something exclusively done to the Enterprise just because Admiral Riker didn't want to retire his old ship.
One of the advantages of being an admiral is you get to choose your own ship.
But with all that said, the timeline was changed and that future never came to be, and the Enterprise was never refitted into a Galaxy Dreadnought. Given that Venture's refit was removed, I think it's likely that the Galaxy Dreadnought may never actually exist in the Prime timeline at all. Why make the Galaxy class more tactical focused when you already have ships well suited to tactical oriented missions, like the Sovereign or Prometheus class? Plus, with the launch of newer, more advanced ships closer to the end of the century, like the Ross and the Odyssey class, it seems like Starfleet was more interested in developing new starships than maintaining their older ones at this point. Even if the Venture did keep its refit and the Galaxy line was refitted to the Dreadnought variant in the Prime timeline, it looks like the Venture wouldn't have been around long enough to see it completed. In the Star Trek Picard Season 2 premiere The Stargazer, we see a number of Sovereign-class ships, of which is confirmed by production designer Dave Blast to be USS Venture NCC 75306, meaning that by 2401, the Galaxy-class USS Venture is no longer in service. Maybe it was lost in one of the later battles of the Dominion War, or maybe even during the synth attack on Utopia Planitia. Just like with Venture's refit itself, all we can do is speculate because there is currently no official explanation. While not canon, Star Trek Online's timeline also implies the loss of the Galaxy-class Venture, since by 2409 the ship has been replaced by a new Venture class, the first of which being USS Venture NCC 71854A. Venture A would also be lost in battle against Species 8472 in the Star Trek Online episode Fluid Dynamics. I hope you enjoyed this deep dive into a relatively obscure variant of the ever-popular Galaxy class. I certainly had fun making the video and actually learned a few things while researching for it. Mainly the part about the digital model. I had no idea that Venture appeared on screen without those extra phaser emitters. The Venture was always kind of weird because of those extra phaser emitters, but then the fact that it loses the very thing that makes it weird makes it even weirder, and then it just disappears and is replaced mysteriously by a Sovereign class. It really just makes you want to know what the hell's going on over there. Unfortunately, we'll probably never get any concrete answers to any of these questions, but honestly, I kind of prefer it that way. The speculation is far more fun. Well, I'll leave the answer with you guys. Why do you think Venture was refitted and then had said refit removed? And what do you think happened to the ship since it was already replaced with a Sovereign class by the time of Star Trek Picard? Let me know down in the comments, and while you're down there, be sure to like, subscribe, and hit that bell for notifications. If you'd like to further support the channel, hit the join button to become a channel member to gain additional channel perks, or check out the merch store or the affiliate links in the pinned comment. If you're ever shopping on the Epic Game Store, be sure to use my content creator code STU1701 at checkout. Any of these really help me out, and I really do appreciate it. Either way, though, thank you so much for watching. My name's Stu, and I will see you guys next time.